Hello, Park Customer Group. Today we're trying a new format to reach out to you. We're going to give you an update on park industries and COVID-19. We're also going to go through a few maintenance and accessory items on our most popular machines. We've been hearing that there's a big pent-up demand out in the industry for the countertops you guys are producing, and we want to give you just a couple tips to help you stay up and running so you can plow through that backlog really nice. At any time during this video, feel free to ask questions through the comments. We'd be glad to answer them. Jumping off on COVID. COVID's affected everybody literally in the world. Park Industries has a COVID-19 task force, and what that task force is doing is monitoring the situation, coming up with best practices and policies to keep not only our associates safe, but we also want to have them free to be able to get to your shops to do installs, to do maintenance, to make sales calls if you need to look at a new piece of equipment, things like that. So they're building these policies to keep us safe, keep you safe, and keep business going as usual. So from a customer standpoint, Park should feel much like it did a year ago. One of the exceptions is, prior to a trip, we're sending out a questionnaire, a flyer, and what it does is it helps us assess the landscape in your shop, in your area around COVID-19. At that time, when we reach out to you to fill out this questionnaire, feel free to answer or ask us questions. We want to answer them. We want you to feel comfortable that we're all doing our best part to be safe if we have one of these trips. Jumping into the equipment tips and tricks, we'll start with some accessories. This is a Fastback 2. We have the new slab loader, or Slabback, system on here. This system can be retrofitted to any Fastback 1 or 2, and what it does is allow you to put a whole countertop through the machine. I'll let Sean talk a little bit more specifically. Another kit we have for this one as an accessory update is for the Fastback 1 owner. We can update the tooling so you can get to the Fastback 2 type of tooling. Again, Sean will speak specifically about that. Here's Sean.
So the Slabback assembly will come in a large crate. These things are made to order. So like Joe said, we can put this on any machine out in the field. It gets shipped to your door. You can hire our group to come out and put this in for you, or we do have a video on our website for you to assemble yourself. Then as we jump into some of the maintenance items on the Fastback, like Joe was talking about, we understand that you're very busy, so we want to just hit on some key items to make sure that you're keeping up with that so that your machine runs optimally. So this is a Fastback 2. And what's nice about the Fastback 2 is we put a central grease bank on the machine so that you don't have to go down here and grease these spindle hubs manually. Now if you're Fastback 1 owner, you're not going to see this down here, but you know that you have grease zerks on this spindle hub and this is part of your maintenance. For a Fastback 1 owner, you're going to use XHP 222 to grease this spindle hub. If you're a Fastback 2 owner, when you're greasing that center grease bank using an XHP 221, it's just a thinner grease so it can go through the grease lines. Some of the other grease points on this machine will be underneath this hood. So this also XHP 222. One thing to keep in mind if you're trying to figure out what goes where, every grease point on here where it has a physical grease zerk on the machine itself, XHP 222. The central grease bank is the 221. That's the only difference. So we're greasing this inside here. We're also going to grease the top of these rollers. So there's a pin that goes down here and it has weep holes in it. You grease through here and it keeps this roller nice and greased inside because this is just polyurethane. In here it's just plastic. You don't want to see any rollers that don't roll or compress. So a good test is you pull this back and then it should flip back to where it was. Back underneath this hood here.
Sean, before you move there, why don't you go through the Fastback 1 tooling upgrade while we're looking back there?
As long as we're here, we'll talk about the tooling upgrade that we did. We came out with the Fastback 2. The white quartz became very popular and we were having issues polishing it. So we went to a soft pad that is very similar to what you guys are using in your shops when you're doing the hand polishing. So Fastback 2 would come with this tooling. If you want to go to this style tooling with a Fastback 1, you would buy a kit from our parts department. It's going to come with the Velcro backers that would go on your existing snail locks, and then these just pull off through Velcro. So it's very nice. Again, as I talked about, compress that, it should pop back. If for some reason it doesn't, you can remove this 3/8 bolt. So let's say the fifth roller, it's not compressing like it should. Remove this 3/8 bolt, you pull it out, there's a spring and a bushing inside there. It's most likely that the spring was either caught on the bushing or it's time to replace that spring. There's 21 springs and bushings in total. we have these at Park readily available. As we move this assembly in and out, you can see that there's grease points here, and I want to point out this assembly we have here because our covers are covering up what it looks like. So all this is a pillow block, and you grease this right here, which will be there. It rides on this drive shaft and on this slide assembly. You keep that grease, and this should go in and out very nicely. There's a chain that goes from the in-feed side to the out-feed side. You can't see it because of this cover. We're protecting it from the elements. But if you look right here, we have an access hole for that chain. So what I would recommend is you follow your book on the maintenance schedule, crank this all the way in, and then have somebody else stand there, spray the chain wax on the chain, and move it out. A lot of times over time these things start to seize up on you. You can buy all of these parts individually, or if you want to try and just get this done quick, you can buy this complete assembly. We have it for the drive assembly and the outfeed assembly. We have it for Fastback 1 and Fastback 2.
Perfect. Let's move over to our Titan 2000. The machine we have here happens to be a 2800, but 2700 is almost identical other than the physical size. We have a couple kits available for this Titan. One of them is an air purge kit for the projection laser. And what we're doing is pressurizing the case of the laser just a little bit with some dry air. It's trying to prolong that longevity of that projection laser and get you longer times between service intervals and failures. One of the other kits we have for this machine is a high flow water kit. We have a kit for the spindle, and we have a kit for the halo. This kit does not generate flow. All this kit does is remove restrictions on the machine to allow whatever your potential flow in your shop is to get out to the work area. With the high flow water kit at the halo, we're seeing if you have the potential water available up to 18 gallons a minute. Through the spindle, we're getting about 3.5. What this will allow you to do is utilize high-speed tooling and just get more production every day, every hour this machine is running. I'll let Sean talk a little bit more about some of the accessories and maintenance items.
Yeah, so talking about the water flow kits, a big goal for us was to make this self-installable, and we have done that. So we have videos and procedures online. You can buy the kits through the parts department or customer service. All you're really doing is changing the components, like Joe said. So we're talking ball valves, and we're increasing the water line size so that we get that optimal flow outside your halo and out of your spindle. Work with your tooling rep with your high-speed tooling to figure out if you actually need the through spindle or halo or both. And then this is not specific to just the 2000 series Titan. We can go as far back as the 1016. So 1016, Titan 1800, we can also put these kits on your machine. It would just require some additional ball valves. So now we'll move into some maintenance items. Again, we're not hitting on every key maintenance item on these machines, just stuff that we want to point out that if you're keeping up with this stuff as you're going through your high production right now to deal with your backlog, this should keep you running optimal. So we'll start with the bellows. All the bellows on our machines with rack and pinion are essentially the same. And as you can see, we keep our bellows very clean and dry in the shop. You want to keep it clear of debris inside of here. So after time, I would say your operator should be blowing this off every day before or after a shift to make sure that it's clean. And then if you follow your book, every 40 hours of runtime, you should also be pulling these bellows back and wiping down your rails. We use Vactor Way Oil number 2 to wipe down these rails. And then I would also recommend that when you're doing that, you inspect inside here, these wipers. If these are full of grit and debris, then I would recommend that you actually remove this end cap so you can fully take this bellow off, flip it upside down, and clean in between there. And then when you're doing that, get an arm roll, put it in a bucket, and get a foaming brush, and clean these bellows individually. And you want to spread them apart, make sure there's nothing inside here or any pinholes. If you do end up with some small pinholes, sometimes you can tape them. If you can't, then I would recommend replacing. This is a pretty expensive item to be replacing because you didn't keep the bellows clean. Also want to touch on these thumb screws. There's 5 thumb screws per point on the machine. So you may think I got 3 thumb screws here holding it in place, I should be good. I recommend you drill and tap this hole out, you replace the thumb screw. It's just a 1/4-20 thumb screw. We have them at Park, we could ship them to you, you can go to the hardware store, but keep this part nice and tight both on the front of the machine and on the bridge. We're going to move back to the bridge As I said, 40 hours of runtime. You're going to be wiping down these rails and coating them with the mobile Vactor oil number 2. Then you're also going to be pumping your bearings with grease. Same grease as the Fastback XHP 222. If you're having some polish issues on the machine, you might want to jump to just thinking you need to replane the table or it's not level. I recommend that we start looking at the rail and bearing system instead. As you can see, inside this bearing, there's little balls that will run in these grooves here on the rail. So what happens over time, if you weren't greasing your bearings or a bearing failed, this will then sit down flat on the rail, and what it does then is it pushes these edges out and they become sharp. So then you might say, my full bull nose came out right here, but every time I go to do it over there, it's not coming out. It's too big or it's too small. Now my tools are wearing uneven. I would check this access first. Make sure that your rails and bearings are good. Now, on the Titan, what's nice is we use a precision gear rack and gear. That's what gives us our tight tolerances to get the polish we're looking for. And if you come back here, I removed the cover on our Y-axis motors, and you can see we have a felt pinion gear that is greasing your pinion, then will in turn grease your gear rack. So most of the grease that is needed for your machines to do the maintenance can be found locally. This is a Kubler grease that I recommend you get from Park. Again, we can't ship grease anything but ground. UPS doesn't allow it. So just plan ahead, plan accordingly. When that reservoir gets half full or quarter full left, order some grease from us, get it to your shop.
Well, we're going to move down to the water jet part of Park's lineup, specifically the SaberJet XP, but we will spend a little bit of time touching on the Fusion. We have some really neat accessories for the Fusion that might interest a lot of people down here. So here's the SaberJet XP. I said we'd talk on the Fusion. They're very, very similar machines. With the Fusion, we created a water runoff kit. What this kit does is add an extra layer of protection for the bellows, the bearings, the rails, since they're a little bit lower on a Fusion type machine. We have a kit for every iteration of the Fusion. We're trying to stock them right now. We're working on building them to get them in stock. So any day now we should have a stock of one of each. They are big. They need to ship freight. I'll let Sean talk a little bit more in particular about that.
So because the Fusion base gets laid down first and our guy levels it, and then the tanks get put in place and we teach the machine where the tanks are, no two Fusions are set up the exact same. So unfortunately, these kits do a great job in protecting your bellows on that X-axis, but right now they are field service. A Park technician needs to install them. But it does just add another layer. When you're dealing with a SaberJet or a Fusion, it uses an abrasive for your water jet to cut. That garnet is getting down on your bellows, creating the pinholes as I showed you on the Titan, and then the rails and bearings are exposed to the elements and those start to fail. So again, just another layer of protection should make those systems last longer. And then as we move into the SaberJet monoblock system now, we moved our rails and bearings up to the top. It's the same rail and bearing system, if you will. We changed brands. It's now a Highwind brand, and these rails will be coated now. Your Fusion rails are also coated now if you go through replacement. Main item on the SaberJet, as you deal with a 5-axis saw, you start getting into porcelain cutting and the tight miter cuts and stuff like that. You want to make sure that your table is up to par. As you can see in our training center, it's probably time for us to start replacing some of this rubber and some of the slats. The rubber comes from Park, so I would recommend that when you start seeing some of the strips go out, you place an order for all the rubber that you need. Should be 60 strips on here. You get a chipped ground, save on that expedited shipping. And then as far as the slats themselves, you can buy them from Park. We can ship them to you freight, or you can work with us and we'll give you the specs on them. So it's just sheet metal you can have cut out. Another thing to keep in mind, if you didn't have time to order your rubber and it's gotten really bad, you can take all the rubber off, go to a backer board, but then that essentially means that this slab loading table is now a flat table, and you will have to touch everything off again, do your Z-axis touch-offs. Other than that, Joe talked about the maintenance kits that we have. So that's not just for our CNCs. We have maintenance kits for Pro Edges. We have maintenance kits for Fastback, your Yukon, your Sierra. The scheduled maintenance stuff, we have procedures on how to do all that, or if you'd like to hire a Park technician, What's nice about a park technician is not only is he going to change your filters and your fluids, he's going to dial everything in for you. So he's checking backlash. For this machine, he's going to dial the blade to nozzle, calibrate that for you. So if you have any questions on cutting, he can go over that stuff for you. Each scheduled maintenance visit takes about a day. Another thing to keep in mind is we're going to send you everything you need to do the scheduled maintenance, except for on a machine like this that deals with hydraulics. Because of the volume, we can't ship that to you. So for example, this is a slab loading SaberJet machine. Scheduled maintenance says that you change the intensifier pump oil once a year. So 30 gallons of hydraulic fluid you'll need. Now, if you've owned the machine for a few years, every 3 years, we're changing the fluid in the slab loader hydraulic pump. So just something to keep in mind.
So Sean, you touched on our ProGuard kits that we have for all these machines, and it's all of our popular machines. We typically have a maintenance kit, and that's the kit of parts, the filters, the desiccant bags, the lubricants, whatever you would need to do that basic maintenance. We basically just took what Sean sends with his field service people, put that into a kit and said, this is a maintenance kit. And it really is, it has you covered. We also have a consumables kit, especially on the water jets, but we have them for the Titan and other machines. But them are them parts that wear out as you use them. They're not failing necessarily, as they're meant to wear. They're the diamond orifices, the seals, the poppets. Our consumables kit is kind of what we determined as that basic, bare minimum level that you should have there. So you're not overnighting an orifice because you're down. You would have it on the shelf, 20, 30 minutes later, you'd be up and running. So them kits are a real good starting point. It might not be enough for every shop. You might want to work with our parts group, our customer service, our field service folks to figure out what should I add once I have this consumables kit. And then we have the spare parts kit. And what we did is we worked with engineering at Park. We worked with our customer support, the people that pick up the phone to help you get a machine running, and our field service folks to say, what should we put in there for that emergency downtime type part? We know we can't have a whole spare machine on your shelf, so we tried to be real selective in how we did that. We looked at cables, power cables, encoder cables, and many times them cables are the exact same cable but of varying lengths. So what we would do is we'd stick that cable, the long one, in, knowing you could coil up the excess to get back and running. But really the centered thought around these kits are, what would our customer service team, if they had something on your shelf, what would be the most useful to get you right back up and running and not have to wait till tomorrow or 2 days from now to get parts? We just know it's all about, with a backlog, staying up and running. And you know what, going down at 3 in the afternoon waiting for UPS to show up at 10 the next morning, that's a lot of opportunity that you weren't cutting that you could be. Now you got to juggle your schedules, your install schedules, things like that. So we said, okay, if we had a kit, what parts would we put in it? So if you went down at 3, maybe by 3:30, 4, 5 o'clock, you could be up and cutting, and second shift could be going strong. First thing in the morning, first shift comes in, and they have an operating machine. We're not waiting for UPS to show up. So put a lot of thought into them. Our parts department, our customer service people would love to work with you to identify which specific kit you need for your serial number. They can also work with you to add parts to it if you think, you know what, that's a good starting point, but I need a little bit more. I'm going to kick it back to Sean. We're going to move over to the Intensifier.
Before we get to the Intensifier, we'll talk about this machine. So with the Fusion and the Titan, we talked about grease points. What's nice about our SaberJet and our new style Titan, and an option for you is an auto lube system. So this SaberJet has the auto lube system, and it's going to grease your X, Y, and Z bearings for you. It's also going to grease your Z-axis ball nut. The one thing that I want to point out that it does not grease for you is your nozzle assembly, that rise and fall right there, that you need to grease, and then also your arbor, that you also need to grease manually. So now we'll move into some Intensifier tips. So as Joe talked about our consumable parts kits, we want to point out that it's very important that when you're calling into Park, you specify what machine you're working on. You might think, I have 2 SaberJets and I just need 2 kits, but that might not be the case. So we'll ask, what serial number are you working on? Do you want kits for both machines? Because this Intensifier will look the exact same, most likely, as your Fusion Intensifier, but based on the horsepower of the machine, these components might be a different size. So just make sure you're working with Park and letting them know what machine you're working on so we can get you the correct parts, so that when the machine is down, you go to replace something, you have the right size part to do so. Now we talk about, I'm not going to get too far into intensifier maintenance because we have lots of videos, and I think it's really helpful if you download the Hypertherm app and you just, especially if you're a first time guy doing it, you follow the app to a T. It's very helpful. I still use it out in the field. But I want to talk about the torque spec on here. So you don't just want to, when you're tearing this apart, torque this back to the 275 foot-pounds that we recommend. I want to make sure that you're doing it in an X pattern and you're doing it in 50 foot-pound increments. So let's say that you had an overstroke alarm, you're most likely going to need to replace high or low pressure poppets. So when it comes to removing these high pressure lines, if we need to remove this one so we can get this cylinder off, what we would do is put a wrench here and hold this T-block in place. We would actually loosen this line and this line first, and then we would move our crescent wrench so we can remove this line. Then you're going to remove these nuts. You'll pull this off, and because you have the Park Industries consumables kit, you are ready to rebuild your intensifier.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sean. We just want to thank you all for the time. If you liked the video, let us know through the comments. We'd be happy to do more of these videos if you had a particular process or a particular machine you'd like to see something on. Again, put it in the comments. We'd be happy to come back and do another one of these. If not, enjoy your time. Hopefully you have a huge backlog that you're efficiently getting through, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.